I hadn't really realised or given myself enough credit at the amount of discipline that I do have, because underlying all this is this rhetoric and this story that there's something wrong with me. So there's been this almost disconnect between the shadow and the ego and the stories and actually what I'm doing. I've now realised I've done all these things from a container of inadequacy and scarcity and fear. Imagine what's possible to me outside that container, from a container of freedom.
My guest today has done 14 years in the Australian military, in the army, including being deployed to West Africa, and has given 15 years of his life to the fire service. He's also a competitive bodybuilder and has fathered 2 amazing humans. He's also been a client of mine for a few years and has done trauma therapy and shadow integration coaching. I'd like to introduce you to Blake Abbott. So you growing up as a child had this significant event, and when that event happened, it caused you some pain, and you decided that I'm not good enough, or there's something wrong with me. And at that point, you were looking for something that were going to make you feel okay. And then when you went into the military, you got the uniform, and you noticed that people started to pay attention to you. And same with the fire service. And so that was a bit of an antidote to that feeling of that there's something wrong with me and I'm not okay, I'm not enough. And so if I grow this big body, put this uniform on, now I am enough. And that helped you to overcome that somewhat?
It helped overcomes, not, I now understand is completely the wrong word.
Okay.
It helps silence those negative voices.
Ah, gotcha.
Yeah. And so I now see, looking back again, because I didn't know what I didn't know, but starting work with you, when you cracked that door that first time, and Mum, you just put a little crack in it when we did that self-audit.
Yeah.
I'll never forget that. Like, I think we did, 3 A4 pages or something of that sort of stuff. And yeah, and then that made me realise, and not at the time, but subsequently over the next coming years, that I was living a life of inauthenticity, and I would lie and I would create scenarios and I would embellish stories and stuff like that because I wanted to be accepted. Because I wanted people to like me. I didn't want people to just overlook me because I was mediocre or anything like that. So who I really was and who I really am, that person was shelved a long time ago, because that person, he didn't fit in. He wasn't accepted. So just being yourself. And then that was reinforced by my parents, predominantly my mother, and I'm not a victim of anything. I want to get that out. I went through victim mindset for a long time when all that, but I've since transcended all that and realised that, I don't condone the way I was raised. I don't have a relationship with my parents anymore, and that's my choice because it's better for me to not have that in my life. But those things all added up to the person that I have become and to who I am now. So I wouldn't change anything because, it's helped me find out all that stuff, like the work that we've been doing. But getting back to the situation with my parents, like my mother was, there was some things going on there that were an addictive type personality traits. And with that, I didn't realise. And after the event that happened in primary school, I would prior to it and afterwards, I was left in the car for hours while she was off doing other things, and that all added into the story that there was something wrong with me, because I didn't know what she was doing at the time, but I now do. And it's like, well, why wouldn't she want to take me with her? She wants to take me shopping with her. We go up to Tweed Heads and go shopping and stuff like that. And then I just get left for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours in a car, because the poker machines had a better pull, pardon the pun, because they were a handle back in the day. Yeah. And subsequently, I then realised, jumping ahead to this last relationship I had, that was the same scenario, because that was very familiar to me. Yeah. So that was, quote unquote, love was extremely familiar to me. So even though that relationship was not ideal on many levels, that I now understand was the reason I kept going back and back and back. And each time the negative aspects of it escalated, but I just couldn't let go. And I think one of the things through our work together was that you understand is that I didn't know why, and I was frustrated.
Yeah.
I was so frustrated, and I could not understand why I keep subjecting myself to that situation. Yeah.
That's so eloquently put. And just for our audience sake, I'd like to summarise that a little bit and give a bit of the background story, because the audience doesn't know you like I do. And what you were referring to then is that as a young boy, what age were you when you were in the car, roughly?
So around year 5, year 6.
Of school?
Yeah.
So what's that, 10?
School. Yeah, 10,
Okay.
10, 11 around there.
So your mum had an addiction, basically a gambling addiction, and she would go to the casino and had to take you, and then she would leave you in the car and go into the casino and play the pokie machines, probably for hours at end, and you were left in the car. And I imagine, I don't know, how did you feel being left in that car? What was coming up for you? What thoughts or feeling processes were coming up for you?
I could put myself back in there, and I just thought it was normal.
Okay.
Yeah. Now looking back, I realise what that was not normal, and it was actually reinforcing a lot of the things that I created.
When did you decide? Because in one of our therapy sessions, you had this breakthrough moment. I remember it quite clearly, and you do too, I'm sure, when you said, "Oh my God, there's nothing wrong with me." So as a 50-year-old man, you've realised there's nothing wrong with you. That tells me that at some point in your life, you decided that there was something wrong with you. When was that point? Was that when you were 10 years old and locked in the car? Or do you remember when you made that story up that there's something wrong with you?
Yeah, the incident happened on the playground in primary school in year 5, yeah.
Yeah, so do you want to just summarise what happened on the playground briefly, that you decided there's something wrong with you?
Yeah, so we had a group of friends in primary school. I had a peer group, for want of a better term. And, so we were, as young boys do, we were cruising around, and we had this quote-unquote gang that we'd formed at school. And we had a hierarchical structure that we put in place, and we had allocated people that were to be leaders for X amount of time, and each person would have their turn. My turn was coming up, and on the playground one day, the current guy who was running the show, so to speak, I now know he was the talking head, because behind the scenes there was one individual in particular, I feel energetically, that was the driving force of this. But as a group, with this group mentality, gang mentality, no one wants to be pushing back against the popular people and stuff like that. So that's when this individual who was the puppet sort of said, "Look, we don't want you to be a leader again, and we don't want you in our gang anymore, so you've been kicked out." And I can remember, even sitting here, I can just see that little boy just stunned. I had no idea what had happened. And in that instant, I thought, I'm different to everyone else. And that it just escalated over time, that story in my head. Yeah.
It sounds very Shakespearean, a bit like something like you might see in a Macbeth play where, there's a whole gang of people and it's one of your peers that stabs you in the back.
Yeah.
And so that was a wound, right? And that wound was a traumatic event. And sometimes when we're young and things happen to us that wound us, it's not what happened to us, but it's the story that we tell ourselves about what happened, and you made that mean that there's something wrong with me, and that I'm not good enough. I don't belong. All those things.
Yep.
Yeah. And that was that impetus, and so then you walked off, and then so 40 years later you discover there's nothing wrong with you. So you spent 40 years of your life believing that there was something wrong with you, and you brought up the last relationship you were in, and there was an addictive element to that in your partner. And sometimes, like when we have these wounds from childhood, we're looking to reconcile them or resolve them, and we can reproduce similar events so that we can, have the breakthrough that we're looking for. So you've attracted a partner who had issues with addiction. And do you think that's because that unconscious programming is, well, I'm not good enough, and this is what I deserve. I don't deserve better than this, or something like that? Or what was it that kept you in that relationship?
I think you hit the nail on the head once when I was just reaching out to you because I was getting in a funk and stuff like that. And it comes down to worth. So in my understanding of that whole relationship and why I kept going back to that abuse time and time again, and I use that word, and it was, but it's 2 to tango in this relationship, and I'm not an angel, so I'm not pointing fingers. I'm not a victim of anything. And this person was doing what she knew how to do based on her life and her DNA and her upbringing, that sort of stuff. So I would take it very personally, but now I look back and just say, I'm not condoning anything. I don't want to go back there or anything like that. But so it was a situation that I found myself in because it was familiar, more than anything. So I just lost my train of thought. What was the original thing we were getting at about why I'd...
Can you draw any conclusion as to your mum had an issue with addiction, and then later in life you've attracted a woman in your life that has an issue with addiction? Is it that there's something in you around I'm not good enough and that's all I deserve? But you said something that it's about how worthy you are.
Yeah. So I like, for me, she was what I felt I was worthy of.
Yeah.
And I had put her on a pedestal as the years went on, and I got more and more and more enveloped in that energy, and then I become more and more clingy, more and more desperate. I become, for want of a better term, demasculated. The energy polarity shifted, and then I think she took on a more masculine role because I become very submissive because I had this huge fear that she was going to leave me. And I didn't do anything. There was nothing wrong, but underwriting this whole time was this fear of rejection, fear of being left because there's something wrong with me, which goes back to the original concept.
Like when you were left in the playground.
Yes.
When you were excommunicated from your peer group, and you felt all alone.
Yeah.
And that was the wound that you were trying to avoid in this relationship. 100%. So even though your ex had issues with addiction and that relationship was quite volatile, and, a person without that wound mightn't stay in a relationship like that as long, but that wound is maybe what kept you there, is that I don't want to be ostracised and out on my own anymore. Yeah, wow. Okay, I didn't see that connection till just now.
Yeah. And there's also going back to the wanting to be seen, because there was an element of this this relationship. She's quite younger than me. And in my mind, the image of her, of other people would see us together, and actually it was reinforced. We get feedback of how good we were together and all that sort of stuff, and I loved all that. That was feeding into that that shadow, the ego side of it as well. And I understand it was from her side as well. We were both we were the perfect gift for each other. I don't know what she's done since then. I know what I've done, and she was a massive blessing in disguise. Sitting here looking back, and I'm grateful for the experience. Although at the time, as you know, I nearly put myself in the ground twice. Once I dipped my toe over and had a look, and it just went black, because it just went completely black, and I went no. All I heard was this huge, bellowing male voice, just no, and then I just snapped back, dressed the wound myself, and the rest is history. But yeah.
So you went to some pretty dark places in that relationship, around being rejected, being abandoned, being on my own. It probably brought up that childhood wound. And and I'm sure people listening to this, some people may have been in that space, that dark space. And so when that happened, you were probably contemplating not wanting to be here. Is that what came up?
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I just wanted the noise to stop. Because I had an individual 2 inches from my face yelling and screaming, and I was copping spittle and all that sort of stuff on me. And I still to this day don't know how that escalated to that or what happened. But that was the straw for me, that for whatever reason, when that individual finally got out of my face, I didn't say anything. I was calm. I just remember leaning on a bench, just looking blankly. And I just wanted the noise to stop. I couldn't hear anything else. And it's in my mind, every single person on this planet, my kids, my sister, friends and that. No one's going to miss me anyway. So no one really cares about me. I'm not seen. You know, I'm broken. There's something wrong with me. I mean, I'm being abused left, right, and centre. It's like, well, okay, well, and I can't quantify it. I really can't articulate it, why or how. But I just remember that I want the noise to stop. And 2 seconds later, it was done.
Oh, well, look, I just want to acknowledge your vulnerability to share so deeply and vulnerably that kind of experience. And what I'm seeing is someone who has got their own voice in their head saying that I'm not good enough, there's something wrong with me. And then you've got this person who's saying the same thing, not shouting at you, that what she was probably shouting derogatory, demeaning things at you. And so now you've got it coming not only from inside but outside, and just being bombarded with all this negativity and self-loathing kind of conversation. And that's just feeding into the wound, that wounded child wound. Mm-hmm. And then it's just like, well, this is what my life's become. I just want this to stop. You know, I can't tolerate this level of abuse or character assassination. Yeah. It's an interesting segue, but I think it's probably worth going there briefly, is that it's interesting because this was a female partner of yours and she was really coming after you on the attack. And women will do this when they're very pissed off and angry. Their highest form of aggression is character assassination. You know, they'll rarely revert to fisticuffs like men do. And so I imagine, you know, like in her...
Not in this case.
No, right, okay, right. Yeah, some women will go to fisticuffs. And I don't recommend, you know, any women listening do that. No good comes from that kind of violence. And so your ex-partner was going to assassinate your character, because this is what women do when they're really pissed off and want to be ultimately aggressive. And because you're already wounded, then that's just compiled that feeling of, well, you know, it's not worth it. I just don't want to be here anymore. And then this voice in your head, was it masculine voice?
Very masculine, very deep, almost godlike. In, you know, like how you see it portrayed in the old Hollywood movies.
Right.
There's the big, booming, bellowing no.
Great. Yeah, well, I'm glad you listened to that voice, because here you are. Yeah. It's been really, like I call it the hero's journey, what you've been through. And if we just go back a step, like, you know, in my introduction, you know, I mentioned that, you know, you've done 14 years in the military, including being deployed to West Africa, 15 years in the Queensland Fire Service, and you're a competitive bodybuilder. Like, you're the stereotypical masculine or the archetypal hero. And, you know, when I think of you like running off over a bunker with a gun to go face the enemy, or running into a burning building to save a child. And so there's this whole archetype of you that's like the archetypal hero. And you've been through this hero's journey in your life. Now, if you look at human stories, they have a hero and they have a villain and they have an ordeal. And the way, when I look at those stories, I see myself as the hero, but I also see myself as the villain. And so in that context and in that light, it would be easy to see your ex as a villain, wouldn't it? In your kind of hero story of the dark night of the soul and the ordeal that you went through that nearly killed you. And so, yeah, so I want to keep that inquiry open as we continue the conversation and see if you can identify the hero in you and also the villain in you. And because it's the hero in you that's still here, but there were times in your life where you probably showed up as the villain as well. And I think that's some of the work we did when we did the shadow integration work. So I'd like to go just to, so you're looking really buff, like you got an impressive rig on you at the moment. Are you currently training for a bodybuilding competition?
Yeah. Just before we go there, I just want to reiterate that speaking about my past relationship, as I said before, it takes two to tango. And yes, I was a villain. Yep. And the thing is, at times, and I recognise that now through working with you, that I fully accept I can be both things at any time or all the time. But now I'm aware prior to this trauma work with you and opening that door to the car, metaphorically, and literally, I could only see myself as a victim and this hero. That's all I could see. But this shadow in me was running the show. And it was like, for me, it felt like it was just sitting there on a computer game, just directing me around at its own whim and having a bit of a laugh here or there. I don't know sort of how else to phrase it, but I can see that, and now I can feel and see the difference in me. Like we spoke just before this, talking about, there was probably about an hour, I had this internal struggle about being here. Being here now and talking to you is fine, and I'm relaxed. It dropped out probably about 15, 20 minutes before I got here. But again, I just noticed that was a shadow coming up, these old stories and everything about talking about this, because I'm going to be talking about myself. Whereas I now look back, you talk about the things that I've achieved and the military and the fire service and all that, encapsulated in those entities on their own are huge amounts of physical, mental, sacrifice, discipline, effort, I can now look back on that and go, I did that, and I'm pretty good at what I do, and like one of the specialist areas in the army was to become a physical training instructor. I did that from a container of inadequacy and thinking that I'm not good enough. Not only did I get selected to go onto the 6-month physical training instructor's course, I just come back from overseas deployment. I was in country for 2 weeks. And the first day they have what's called a barrier test. And I nearly failed. There's a board in our locker room. There was a board, all the names, and there's a line. And if you're underneath that line, it's not ideal. Where did my name go first day? Bottom of the list. 6 months later, student of merit. Presented on a shield. Someone sent me about 3 weeks ago a picture of that shield with my name on it. That's at the PD office that we did, was that 92? 20 years ago, it's still there. Can't take that away. I now can look back predominantly from the work I've done with you and go and be proud of that and say, yeah, I did that. I was, I could put myself back in the time and I'm thinking I'm not good enough. There's something wrong with me. Oh, this is a joke. Someone's where's the cameras? It's a got you type moment, that sort of stuff. And I never fully felt and encapsulated those achievements and what I'd actually done. And then moving into the fire service, and at 40-something, I went and did a 16-week recruit course again. Got through that, 2 hip replacements because they've fallen apart. The second one fell apart I'm now an officer in the fire service on my officer's course, and just 4 weeks of relentless just drills and drills and drills in the cement. But just did it. And I didn't realize, I didn't give myself enough credit, just did it. Just hard stuff. But, the mental tenacity and the mental drive that I have now and the discipline aspect of that, I never saw it. All I saw was this, and I get the accolades and I get get on stage. I won a national title back in 2017, won state titles and that in bodybuilding. You get the recognition. I've been in magazines, I've had features and stuff like that. What other people see was I used to see this little kid from high school, this little fat kid from high school, sitting on the the oval, thumbing through magazines and stuff like that. So the disconnect between reality and the story in my head and this image that this shadow had me living by, was now I see as just, it's almost comical about it. It's just words. It's just, it makes me laugh. So being able to sit here and talk to you about that, to be able to sit here and talk about suicide attempts and not get emotional is new for me.
Great.
Because I now know that's part of me and I'm okay with it.
Yeah.
You want to judge me on that? I've had my own parent call me a coward for it, that sort of stuff. And I'm like, yeah, cool. You know what? You can call me a coward. But if you think I'm a coward, that's awesome because I know you've never been where I went mentally and I'm happy and I hope you never go there. Call me a coward for the rest of your life. I'm happy with that. Yeah. The moment you come back to me and say, I understand what you've been through, that's a scary time.
Yeah, I really like that ability in you, Blake, to be able to see and own all aspects of self and that, we can all be a coward. You've been able to see the hero in you, you've been able to see the victim in you, and now you've even been able to see the villain in you because you've done some shadow work. And, we can all be all of those things. So, yeah, I was going to talk about discipline when I was mentioning your impressive rig, because I see in you it takes discipline to create a body that you've done. And I don't know what your views on discipline are. Some people think that they've got to wait for the discipline to come, and if once the discipline comes, then I'll be able to do the things. For me, the discipline is the doing. It's not like you got to wait to the discipline before you start doing. And this is something that I've discovered for myself, is that I've been quite undisciplined in my life at times. And recently, in the last few years, I've really developed more discipline. And I wasn't waiting for something to come, or motivation or inspiration. I just thought, I just need to start doing. And then when you repeat the doing, that creates the discipline. And then you just apply yourself. Is that what's your experience with discipline? Because I'm sure you've had a lot of discipline in terms of army, military, and bodybuilding. So what's discipline for you?
That's a good question. I hadn't really realised or given myself enough credit at the amount of discipline that I do have.
Yeah.
Because, again, underlying all this is this rhetoric and this story that there's something wrong with me. But I've gone to work running from that something wrong with me. I didn't even realise I was doing it. So there's been this almost disconnect between the shadow and the ego and the stories and actually what I'm doing. And I like I mentioned it before, I've now realised I've done all these things from a container of inadequacy and scarcity and fear. You know, like imagine what's possible to me outside that container, from a container of freedom. So this is sort of the transition I'm in at the moment, you know, and it's taken 4 or 5 decades to get there. But in my view, this is a journey of the soul that I don't have to come back and repeat. There'll be others, but this is, you know, I think I've transcended this a little bit now. So, yeah. But discipline to me, where it is for now, yeah, there's a physical discipline and there's just getting up and grinding, doing that, and that's what you have to do. But the big thing I understand now is disconnect between my discipline of achieving and the discipline of the mind. So now I'm starting to become very disciplined of my mind and taking control of my mind back now, whereas my shadow had full control of that,
Gotcha.
especially in the last 4 or 5 years. It got really bad.
So you became undisciplined mentally and allowed these stories of I'm not good enough, there's something wrong with me to creep in, and you started to listen to those rather than be disciplined and go, okay, I hear that inner critic, but you know, I'm going to override that with a disciplined mind. Yeah. And so while you've been disciplined in work and in body, when you're in that relationship, probably maybe whatever was going on in that, you needed that person, you were afraid of being abandoned and rejected. And so for some reason that sabotaged you being mentally disciplined, and you allowed other stuff to override that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I've been distracting myself from doing this work with you for decades. You know, I was introduced to you through a mutual friend, and it just grew from there, you know, and I still go back to that that audit we did, like I mentioned before, but then that first trauma session we had, the first big one, where metaphorically I opened the door to the car, you know, I still remember to this day, like just standing it, and I couldn't remember I was saying to you, I couldn't open the door. Like I was right there and I couldn't open it, and then it clicked, you know, there's nothing wrong with the door opened.
Right.
And it got.
It's interesting, the door of the car represents for me a door in my unconscious mind, and there's some wound behind that door, because we've all got wounds and traumas from our past, but we hide them in our unconscious behind a door, and then we put a guard in front of there, and no one gets to go and look at that wound and that pain because it's too painful. You couldn't open the door in the car, which was the imagery you were having that your subconscious was pushing up, and then when you finally did open the door, well, all that was behind there was there's something wrong with me, and you realise, well, that's just a story I made up. And when you discovered that, that's when you had a big breakthrough. Well, I decided as a 10-year-old that there's something wrong with me, and I'm still, that unconscious program and story is still running as a 40-year-old, and it's causing my life to take a certain path, and I'm not worthy of more than this in terms of relationship, etc. And then when you discovered in that trauma session that there is nothing wrong with you, that was a real breakthrough moment, and things started to change significantly for you.
Yeah, that was a huge breakthrough moment, but it's taken a couple of years since we did that one, I think, and it's still taken that time for me to believe it.
Yeah.
You know, I had the revelation and there was that breakthrough moment, but the conditioning for decades prior to that, you know, it's like It's like anything. It's just repetitions, and it's like building a physique to get on stage and go through a prep and all that. It's reps. You got to do the reps. You know, I had plenty of discipline physically to do the reps, but mentally I wasn't doing anything. I was just flowing, going with the flow. Again, I didn't know what I didn't know, but even when I started to understand, I wouldn't consciously do the reps in my mind and catch it. And then, you know, I've got all these tools and stuff I use now from working with you and other people where I see all this stuff. And this morning is another good example. And I can laugh at it now when I catch it.
So now that so it sounded to me what you're saying, if I'm hearing you correctly, is that through the work you've done with me, you've identified that some of the stuff going on in your mind is just stories you're telling yourself.
Some of it.
Yeah, right, a lot of it. Yeah. And that's not reality. That's just a bunch of stories I'm telling myself.
Yeah.
And so you've developed a mental discipline to be able to look at those stories and reality test them. Like, you know, is this story real? Is this just something I'm telling myself? And if I listen to this story and follow that, is that going to work out for me or not? So whilst you've always had the physical discipline, it sounds like you've developed now the mental discipline, and that's made a big difference.
Yeah, huge difference, because it's allowing me to understand that, because I go, oh, that's interesting. So we're going into doomsday thinking again. All right, what else could be a possibility if we go down that road? And then I'm able to layer on top or put next to it a very positive outcome of a very negative story I might be trying to tell myself about an event, you know, because we get into that psychological time, and away we go. And I realize now, even every day more and more so, how much I lived in psychological time and how much anxiety and depression I was bringing onto myself using psychological time and the mind and the stories I create around these doomsday events. And then I could go back in the past and be in regret about something I did at that time, not knowing what I didn't know at the time, and then making myself feel bad about something that happened in the past that I can't change, but happened the way it happened because that's the way it happened, to quote Peter Crone. But yeah, so like all these things now, this is where I get back to laughing at it. It's just like, you know, and one of the things I use is when I catch it, if it gets a little bit too much, is I put myself up in the corner of a dark room with two doors, and I open the door and say, come on then, all these thoughts come in, and I just usher them out the other door. So I realize they're just words. It's not reality. You know, it's like you gave me a tool once of two circles, and what's the actual fact and what's the story I'm creating around that, you know, and I've used that a lot, and I've adapted that in different ways as well, just to give me basically a mental kick in the brain, in the ass, you know. It's just like, come on, dude, snap out of it. What are you doing? You gonna do this again? All right, that's fun. Yeah.
Right. So when you mention psychological time, are you referring to being stuck in the past or projecting too far into the future and getting away from the present moment?
Yeah, not being present. Yeah.
And you've caught yourself doing that, and you realise that being in the present moment is where you want to be, and that's more empowering. Is that what you're saying?
Oh, yeah, 100%.
Yeah, I would say that that's true, and that's my observation, you know, of the present you, and I've known you for quite a few years now, and there was a lot of that, and you had to rehash, you had to go into your past. That was part of our journey, and so, and you also had some fears about the future, which a lot of us do, particularly in these times. A lot of people have a lot of anxiety about the future, and that one of the remedies for that is to come back into the present moment and then check and do an audit of the stories that are going on in my mind. And a lot of the stories in our mind are just fabricated. They're pure fantasy that we make up. But the mind's not a very sharp instrument in its ability to distinguish between something we believe to be true and something that's actually reality. So a thought that we repeat over and over again becomes a belief. So if you're going, oh, there's something wrong with me, there's something wrong with me, even if it's, you know, under your breath or subconsciously, that'll become a belief. And so you believed there was something wrong with you for a long time until in that therapy session, and you realised that was just a story you made up about an unfortunate event that happened when you were 10 years old. Awesome.
And it's taken considerable time after that to reinforce and use that mental discipline to then train the new thought patterns in the brain to be present rather than focus on the past events. You know, it's like, and I was, this is something in my past relationship that you may have told me, is that it's not okay to be made wrong all the time for things that you've atoned for in the past. And trying to bring that into the relationship just added another spark for whatever reason. But again, that's cool. That's where she was at with things, and that's fine. But but not only was that happening externally, but I was doing that to myself. So I was I go into this psychological time of the past and I make myself wrong, and beat myself up and have all this negative narrative about myself, and I would then start to reinforce that story that I'm a loser, I'm not good enough, I'm not wanted, I'm not lovable, and blah, blah, blah. And then when this relationship ended, and I was in my 50s when that happened, and I'm like, all that did was prove to me in my head that, see, you are an idiot, you are broken, you're not wanted, you're not lovable, you're gonna die alone. All those stories come flooding back. And I realized that this person was then there. She was quieting down all that noise. Even though she was bringing a different aspect of noise to me, that to me was okay, because at least someone wants me. At least someone wants to interact with me. Yeah. So when that person's gone, all these stories rise up and all this stuff. In retrospect, I can see it plain as day, but at the time, you probably experience as well, you just don't know. And people on the outside could tell you, those close to you, they could see what's going on, but you don't see it. You don't want to see it, at all, because like for me, she was a unicorn. It's like, oh my God, where have you been in my life? Everything she said and everything she did to me was not the bad stuff, the good stuff it was like she knew exactly what I needed. She knew exactly what I wanted and how to push the buttons to say the right things, not sort of stuff. So was that nefarious from her? I don't know. Was she genuine? I don't know. I really don't know anything about that relationship now, but all I know is that she was a brilliant gift for me to be able to sit here and talk to you.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. I look back at some of my ex-relationships, and I might have an opinion that that relationship wasn't great, but then the lessons that I learned from that, I'm grateful to all my previous partners for the lessons, even though I might have felt, pissed off at the time or angry or annoyed with them. Now I look back and go, there's just so much lessons and gratitude in all of that. So your ex represented to you someone who cared about you, who wanted you, who needed you, and that fulfilled some need in you to be needed. And so you use the word unicorn. Oh my God, who are you? You're fulfilling all this hole in me. You're filling a hole in me.
Yep.
So that's what she represented to you. What do you think you represented to her?
That's a good question. With the way I acted and with the embellishments I placed on certain scenarios and the lies and that, to try and present myself as this hero, the captain, Captain Save-A-Ho mentality.
Save-A-Ho.
Yeah. And I would hear about her upbringing and how she was treated by parents, by ex-partners, by friends and that sort of stuff. And that just galvanized me more to wanting to protect her and that sort of stuff. It was portrayed to me that this individual was very innocent, naive to the world and that sort of stuff. That turned out not to be the case, as I now know for fact. But I took that with both hands as I'll protect you, I'll look after you. I would talk to her about certain things and present how she would present and that. Oh, do you realise this? Do you realise that? She knew the whole time. Yeah. And so in the end, I think that would have come across an external person could have seen that as very controlling. But it come from a genuine place of protection, and I probably just got overboard. Like I become too enamored with making sure that she was okay, that she was protected, that she was all right. Even when this stuff come out about how bad these addictions were, I went to sought help myself for what I was dealing with in this individual, and then I had to make a decision, because then I realized, actually, you don't have to leave. You can actually stay and help, and you can still be functional, blah, 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 if this person really wants to get help. As it turned out, that wasn't to be the case. But so I was like, to me, maybe it was another project. So what I represented to her, I think, was, look, I just think with the way I showed up and presented, which wasn't genuine the whole time, and her buying into that, I think she thought that she looked good with me. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think there's some of it, but I want to go back a step to, because you mentioned something else that I think may be closer to it, is that I think maybe what you represented to her was the hero and the savior, and that maybe she occurred to you like some sort of damsel in distress.
Oh yeah, bang, perfect.
Yeah, because it came out in one of our sessions. I remember that you would even embellish some of your war stories to make yourself a bigger hero than maybe you actually were, and that was feeding into, oh, she needs me to be a real hero and a real savior type.
Another thing was feeding into was that if I was this in her eyes, if she saw me this way, she wouldn't leave me.
She won't leave me. Yeah. So again, that fear of rejection comes up.
Yep.
So I'm going to exaggerate my persona of being this big savior, masculine hero type, and make her feel protected. And the reason I'm doing that, the unconscious thing, which is the shadow aspect of it, is that really I'm a scared little boy who doesn't want to be left.
Perfect. Yeah.
Right. So I'm going to overcompensate.
How ridiculous is it when we've just gone through, what I've done, the jobs, my achievements and all that, that I feel I need to actually add more onto that because it's not enough.
Right. So for you, it'll never be enough.
Seriously?
Yeah, you've achieved so much. Yeah. Like even if you achieved nothing else for the rest of your life, you could die a happy man knowing you've achieved a lot. So I'd like to take it just somewhere else that's related. So, you're this, archetypal hero, stereotypical masculine, like I said, competitive bodybuilder, a soldier, fireman. That's the kind of archetypes that we can think of when we come to the masculine. Most of my coaching clients over the years have been women, and if I do get a male client, it's usually the partner of one of my female clients, or their partner suggested they come and see me. And even like you were saying before, that you got referred to me through a mutual friend who's also a woman. Yeah. So the question I want to ask you around that is that, and this is, I'm speaking to this for the men that are listening, is that women will come out and seek coaching, therapy, counselling, psychology, like kind of the healing arts, and women will more readily do that than men. And I think there's this concept in the masculine that it's weak, that if I need somebody outside of myself to support me, then I'm not enough. And so were there any barriers for you as the stereotypical masculine male, to seeking help? Was there, or was it just a straight, I need help and I can admit that?
Yeah, good question. And I can relate to a lot of stuff you say about men, especially men of my generation. It's just not something we do, not at all. I got to the point where I knew I wanted to know why. And that's always been one of the big inquiries. Why am I behaving this way? Why am I allowing? So this past relationship, very, very similar personality to my first long-term relationship. And in the middle was a beautiful soul who's completely different. And I wanted to know why did this one was no good, the first one. I got out of that, but I went straight to this next one. And then in that one, they're about 7, 8 years each. And then from that one, I sabotaged that one because this unicorn come along. Yeah. So I was in a situation where I made some horrible, horrible decisions, left a very good functioning relationship with a beautiful, loving soul who loved me for who I was. I'd only just joined the fire service, so she knew me as a soldier, but then as a businessman, that's it. Didn't even know me in the military. So all these things that I thought that, women needed in a male to present, I was sort of none of those things yet, like as you described now, yet she was in. And I didn't give that any credit at the time because of this stories running in my head, because in my mind I was something else. So, and then I went into this next relationship, and that was just like, as I said, it was like a unicorn. It's giving me everything I needed, or giving everything this shadow needed.
Right.
Yeah, this version of myself. So I got to that point where I don't, for want of a better term, I was broken. And I just knew, although I couldn't remove myself from this relationship, I didn't know why, and I didn't know why I was constantly wanting the abuse. So for me, it was just a matter of fact, I can't do this anymore. Something's got to change. Otherwise, I'm going to go down the same road. And if I stay with this woman, if I don't get to the bottom of this and I stay with this woman, I'm going to end up in the ground or in jail. And if I get out of this relationship and I don't do something, I'm just going to attract the same. I realized that was a reality to me at that point. It's like, if I don't do something here and I don't go see help, then I'm going to attract the same thing. It's just going to repeat. The cycle is going to repeat. So for me, and it was hard.
Hard to admit that you needed help? Or hard? What was hard?
Hard to open up and be as vulnerable as I have been over time to a male. Going back to the incident on the playground, that was my peer group of males. I've had as I now understand, I've had a distrust of men since that point. I can trust them as far as I could kick them, especially groups. Yet how ironic, because my jobs have involved teams of men.
And trusting men.
Trusting men.
Wow.
Put me overseas in the battlefield, I got no problems. Put me in charge of before I was an officer running into burning buildings, I got a BA team with me where, roofs coming down, or you're cutting people out of cars, or you're picking up bits and pieces of body parts, whatever. You got teams around. You just don't think, it just happens and it's done. And I got no dramas in that situation. Take me back where this thing can start kicking in. So when I'm doing the business and I'm on the ground doing the job, it's automatic. And it's like, it is cliche, but your training kicks in. You just do what you do, and you just know instinctively, unless they tell you otherwise, that everyone else is going to do the same thing. So someone's got your back. Take that away, and all of a sudden come out, and then this thing starts ticking over again, and then all these stories kept popping up. What do you guys want from me? What is it that you want from me? Why are you going to sabotage me? What's going on? No trust. Yeah, I couldn't live like that anymore. For me, I didn't have a choice.
It was desperation.
Desperation. I did not have a choice.
I mean, you've even ended up in hospital on one occasion, haven't you? Through how low you got at times,
Yeah.
and so the reason I mention that is because you don't want to leave it till that's really pushing it, isn't it? You don't want to leave it till you're desperate to seek help if you need help, and this is the issue with men, and this is why the suicide rates for men are 4 times what they are for women. Is because a man's unlikely to admit that he needs help because he sees it as a weakness. And you got pretty close and you got to a place of desperation, and to come and see a male, coach or therapist would have been a bit of a reach for you because, like you were saying, because of what happened in the playground, I don't trust the masculine. Even though I can in my job, I don't trust it in my personal life. And so I'm glad you overcame that resistance. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because I'm wanting men to seek and get the help they need so that suicide rate plummets. And it's something that I feel really passionate about and strongly about is, supporting the masculine to becoming its most authentic and empowered version. And I see that in you. Like I see the change and transformation in you over the years. And just really want to acknowledge like the work you've put in. Your physical discipline is easy to see by looking at your body, but your mental discipline is now also, obvious.
To reinforce that point, for any males listening to this, whatever generation, if there's an inkling and you think, I'm struggling, whatever, that's your soul, that's your intuition, that's your higher self telling you, go get some help. It's society's conditioning that will stop you from doing it. It stopped me from doing it. I mean, especially in the roles that I had, we use black humour a lot in the fire service.
Right.
That's how you deal with things. And they provide care and all that, but it's window dressing. You really got to go and seek the right help.
That was my next question.
Sorry to cut you off, but with you, I felt pretty comfortable with you. I think it was probably because of the person that introduced us, as I had enough trust in her at that time to know that she wasn't going to, and she didn't know anything of this sort of stuff, but she's just genuine, I think. And it worked out quite well in that aspect with you. But it wasn't easy for me, and I think you picked up early on that there was something about me that was standoffish and, what did you call it? The trickster or something? You could feel that in me early on. Yeah, that was my hesitance to open up and be that stuff. But I remember working in those trauma sessions, and when your partner was in the room, I felt heaps more comfortable, like in the initial stages. And remembering there was periods there in that trauma session where I needed to feel that energy. Like just you in the room was getting too confrontational for me. And so I just needed the balance of that female energy next to me and being able to touch them both. And then I could settle with both of them. I'll never be able to explain that properly. It was just felt so right. And I think it happened in 2 sessions. And then the second time it didn't last as long. And I just remember going, yeah, I'm good now. Yeah, I was just like, and I don't know what was happening at the time. I can't remember, but I started to feel quite uncomfortable and uneasy. And I think it was a male thing, and maybe that was coming out to be dealt with. Yeah, that distrust.
So having my partner, that feminine in the room, brought some balance
Pretty much, 100%.
to the session, because we've got a masculine and a feminine side to us. We've got our own internal feminine, and you have a mistrust, for good reason, or a partial mistrust of the masculine, and probably some mistrust of the feminine, but also trust in the feminine, because we can all have both, right? Depending on what's showing up. Yeah. But having my partner there provided that balance between, I can trust the masculinity because the feminine energy is right there with it, or something like that.
Yeah. I was in. I can now look back and see I was in like purgatory and no man's land between the two the polarities, because I had this distrust of males, but then also, I don't know if it was a distrust of females, but I don't think I ever really could open up and fully be vulnerable and present with them, because they're only going to leave me. There's that narrative in my head that there's something wrong with me, so eventually they're going to leave me because I'm a loser. Right. So that's the narrative of the little scared little boy inside me. But having transmuted all that, from getting him out of the car to having him walk around me everywhere, and to having him in that last session where he enveloped around my heart. So he was safe, and then since then he's let go, and he's back into the soul energy. So he's safe now, and so I'm starting to integrate that now. That scared little child in me is no longer there. It's the man present now, So he's safe. He's got what he needs, and he's off.
Yeah, I describe myself as an integration coach, and what you're describing there, the therapeutic alliance or relationship that got healed in your therapy session wasn't between you and therapist. It was between adult Blake and wounded child Blake. Yep. And they get separated or disintegrated, through trauma. Our adult self gets disintegrated from our wounded child. And what you managed to do, and you articulated it so beautifully, was that you were able to reunite with your wounded self, the wounded child, and take that child and put it in your heart, and integrate those two aspects of yourself into a complete whole picture of you that is reconciled. And so that's a form of integration. In the same way that when we do shadow integration work, we cast our shadow out and disown it as part of ourself, and we just see ourself as our ego. And when I'm doing shadow integration work, I'm getting people to take that shadow bit, those parts of themselves that they've rejected, and integrate them back into a wholesome personality. So, same with psychedelic integration. In a psychedelic experience, you can disintegrate parts of yourself. And so sometimes after psychedelic experiences, people need to be put back together again. So it's a process of integration or wholeness. Another question I wanted to explore with you, before you came to me, had you had any counselling? Had you ever seen a therapist, a psychologist? You said in the service they offer. Had you ever been in the fire service and witnessed something horrible, and had to go see the psychologist that they provide and get some support? That did happen?
Yeah. And I was through the military, because through DVA I see psychologists and I've seen psychiatrists and all that sort of stuff, ongoing since late 90s pretty much. Yeah. Okay,
so you've had some considerable experience talking to psychologists, psychiatrists, counsellors?
Got to the point though where they were great help. Some were better than others. And some were just, they put it, they were just happy to give you drugs. Okay. Straight up, within first session, 20 minutes, I hear take these SSRIs and stuff like that. And I went down that road. Yeah. I had faith in that sort of stuff. I thought it was the right thing to do. I now know better. But so I saw a lot of that stuff. And it got to the point though where it helped so much. Yeah. But I knew, and I thought I was okay, but hang on a minute, why is this stuff still happening over here? I've done that. I thought I got to that. All right. And I found that I didn't have quote unquote any tools or anything like that. Not that I need them, because I'm the tool. It's inside me. But there's certain things that I can use and adapt to help me, like I said, with the room and the circles and things like that. They're great tools for me to use. But But again, just being straight up, I found that a lot of them would just tell me what they thought I wanted to hear. Whereas you gave me what I needed. Not only to hear, but to feel. So, and I've noticed that after therapy sessions with you, I'll go through that integration. This last one lasted a fair while because we did a lot in that last session. That I'd reach out and you were very to the point and very logical, and you never fluffed around anything. There's no fluffy bunnies and rainbows with you. It was just like, this is what you need, and you would actually congratulate me on what the revelations I was coming. So, reading back through some of my messages, they seem like dribble, but they're actually just my thoughts coming out, and I'm actually processing stuff as I'm writing this to you. And at the end of it, like I'll have this big paragraph, and you'll just have a sentence say, "Well done, it's a great integration." That's all you'll write, and I'll be like, "Okay, yeah," because I'll be thinking in the past, why aren't you giving me all this fanfare, and why are you telling me how great I am and that sort of stuff? It's like, that's not what I need. It's just like, you've done the work yourself, dude, Yeah. So that's one of with you, working with you, that's been one of the best things. Like, you're this next level above any formalized counseling or psychiatry I've ever had. Yeah. No. So for me, it was perfect, and it continues to be the thing I needed.
Yeah. Yes, that's great, because that was kind of behind my question, was that because I've seen therapists in my early 20s. I saw a couple of clinical psychologists for a few years, did primal therapy, counselling, all sorts of things, and I'm a qualified trained counsellor and therapist, but I'm also a coach, and I'm far more passionate about my coaching than I am about counselling or therapy, and so for you, because we did both therapy and coaching. And even when we did therapy, a lot of what I was doing in the therapy was coaching. And the type of coaching I use is looking at, well, what's the shadow saying? What's the hidden bits? What's the bits I don't know that I don't know about myself? And I bring those into the picture. And how would you describe the difference for you between, say, seeing psychologists or psychiatrists in the past and being given medication or talk therapy, and then having more of a direct kind of coaching approach? Like, how did that make a difference for you? Like,
night and day, because putting myself back into counselling or a psychologist or psychiatry sessions, they would ask questions, and you'd start to explore something. But again, it's all conscious. Right. It's all your conscious mind. So you're telling them, and are you being completely honest with them? Probably not. Are you telling them everything? So are they getting the full picture? Definitely not. All right, you're telling them what you want, the good bits. Yeah, you're not being completely honest. There might be a very small percentage of people that are completely open and vulnerable with a psychologist or a psychiatrist. If they are, they've been with them for a long time. So, and if a good therapist in that realm will be able to see that and know the person, be able to pick it out. Working with you in that trauma therapy, I did the work myself. Yeah, you just cushioned me along the way, right. And you basically. You were like two big oven mitts of padding, and you were just sort of like directing me, because I would start talking about something and then I might go off another tangent. You go, and you just push me back over here because we might need to explore that bit. And being able to get into that subconscious mind and then understand and realize, oh my God, seriously, that's what's been running the show, and then when the penny dropped, that there's this thing in the background, there's this program like on a computer that runs consistently in the background that you don't see, that just puts up a pretty interface, and presents a really nice montage of the identity that you give yourself. At the end of the day, it's a mannequin, and each day you put new clothes on it. And that's all you're doing, because underneath it, the mannequin's still the same. You're still acting the same, you're still interacting with people, you're still taking things the same way, negatively, whatever it is. You're not fixing anything, because all you're looking at is the surface. What I needed, and I didn't know I needed it, was to get into the subconscious, into that neural network, that programming that's been set up as a child back on the playground and in the car, and then subsequently reinforced with my own negative biases about how I'm interpreting life happening around me. And all of a sudden, something will just gel with this story I'm playing in my mind. See, I knew it.
Right.
And there could have been 2,500 great things about that conversation, and that's the one thing I'll focus on, because that subconscious is looking for it. It's looking for that reinforcement of that negative narrative, whatever it be running. And as soon as it gets it or a hint of it, see, knew it. See, they're no good for you. See, they want to take something from you. See, you're just being used. Whatever story I was running at the time, I don't know. I'm sure there was thousands of them. But yeah, that for me was the massive benefit, is that I was going to say you didn't make me do anything, but you allowed me to go in there and figure out my own shit.
Look, that's great. I'm glad you mentioned that, because that wasn't even on my mind. But I'm very aware when I'm working with clients, either in therapy or in coaching, that I'm not a healer. The only healing I've ever done is here with me. And I say this, I would have said this to you probably a few times. And I think we all have to heal ourselves. You know, there's that physician, heal thyself. I think that was Socrates or someone said that. And I think that sometimes the mistake we make is we might go see a therapist or a psychiatrist or psychologist, and they're wearing a white lab coat and they look very impressive, and we outsource our healing to them, and we think that I'm just going to go there and they're going to heal me, and I'm going to tell them, but I'm not going to be completely honest. I'm going to tell them what I think they want to hear, thinking that, they're going to fix me. And I think that's a flawed model when it comes to mental health. And when I'm working with clients, it's like, I can't fix you. I can't heal you. I'm not that clever. But I trust and have faith that you can heal yourself, and you can put right what's not right in your world. And so as a coach, I'm really, like you say, just guiding you and having you look at things differently, and even having a look at some of that unconscious content and those stories that you're unaware of until you shine a light of them and become aware of them. And so that's why I'm more passionate about the coaching, because as a therapist and counselor or psychologist, you don't really give advice, you don't give direction, you're just this supportive listener. Whereas as a coach, coaching is about giving people direction. And I gave you direction, and I suggested you trial doing things new ways. And as you said, you did all the work. I just showed you where you could work differently, and you took that on. For some reason, you trusted that what I was offering you was useful, and as it turns out, it has been. Yeah. And
it's like, it's cliched, but you have to want to change. As an individual, you have to want to do the work. Like the whole horse to water, it's so true. You can't make anyone do anything. And like as we said before, I was in a position where I was desperate. I didn't know what I was desperate for. I just knew I was desperate not to be in that situation ever again. It actually dawned on me as well. It's like, and this is another Peter Crone quote. It's like, have you noticed that wherever your problems are, there you are? And that responsibility and that ownership, and then allowed me to drop the victim mindset, because you know what? Fuck, I've created this. I've attracted this person. I've attracted this situation. I put myself here. This is all on me. Fuck me. Really? So I can't blame anyone. I can't blame my parents. I can't blame my ex-partners. I can't blame you. I can't blame my dog, anything, you know?
Brilliant.
And I've done that for decades, but didn't realize I was doing it, you know? And I now catch myself going into a victim narrative. I was like, oh really? We're going to do this? Yeah. You know? But so I can see it now. It's just, yeah.
So for decades, you saw yourself as a victim.
Oh.
And you were looking for people to find fault with and to blame. And through working with me, and you know, I understand this quite well, because I saw myself as a victim for a long time too. And it was only when I dropped the victimhood or the victim story that my life really started to improve drastically. And that, sure, I was a victim as a child. You know, you could make a case for that. But for me, walking around as an adult with a victim story or victim identity is not helpful. It's very disempowering. And so rather than look for blame or fault outside of yourself, you started to take self-responsibility. Oh, hang on, I'm doing this to me. And that was a big breakthrough for you. And once you realised, because the power is in what you can take responsibility for. If your life is a mess because of everybody else, you can't do anything about it because everybody else caused that. But if as an adult you're willing to look at, well, hang on, where did I create a mess in my life? And am I willing to take responsibility for that? And then when you do, then you can make big changes. So that was another breakthrough for you, when that you saw that you were being a victim and that you were doing that to yourself. Yeah. And you don't want to go back there, the victim thing. No.
And it's like, talk about a financial aspect, you know, it's like the financial situation anyone's in, but me particularly at the moment, is because of the decisions I've made. good, bad, indifferent, doesn't matter. You know, it's the same with your partners. It's the same with the friends you keep. It's the same with the animals you buy. It's the same with the places you go. Like if you decide to go somewhere and you have a car accident, it's not that person's fault. It's not your fault. It's just something that happened. But people will blame that other person, and it's like, oh my God. But I sort of got off track there a bit. But what I was going to say was, and this is one of the big things I've really that's dropped for me recently is that, like anything, you got to work at this. Yeah, we can just thumb in bum, mind and neutral, go along and with our lives as society or governments want us to be good little worker bees and that sort of stuff, and that's fine. And everyone else is the problem, and I can't get anywhere because of all that sort of stuff. But when you start to wake up and you start to take ownership and responsibility of the things that are happening in your life because you created it, I can't speak for everyone, but I have to work on that every day. I have to remind myself every day. It's not the norm yet, but it's getting more normalized. That I understand, and I'm not being triggered as much by things. Like they use the old adage of traffic. You know, yeah, I get annoyed, but then I'm going, oh, dude, really? Doesn't matter. You know, just let the person in. Oh, they didn't indicate. I used to be the type of guy that I'd let someone in, didn't wave, it would just enrage me. You know, it's like, and I think about that now, and it's just comical. It's like, really? Imagine if people were up there watching you drive along, you're getting enraged by someone just didn't wave at you. It'd be like a comedy show. Just be.
It's that distinction between, you know, shit is happening to me because the universe has got it in for me, or changing that to, hang on, I'm responsible for everything I'm creating in my life. It's a perceptual shift.
Yeah.
And that's the difference between victim and volunteer. Yeah. And you've made that perceptual shift.
Yeah. And I can see the two different, I can see this container I was living in for decades. You know, this fear, not good enough, all those sort of terms that as human beings, we all have them and we all live with them. Yeah, but I'd say 99% of the people don't realise that. And that's where the victimhood lives in there because of all these things that are happening to me. Everything's happening for you and you've created it. So if it's not where you want it to be, you're the one that can change it. Yeah. And that realisation is one thing. Putting that into action is another. Yeah. So the two, it's very easy to come back into this because the mind is so powerful. I've realised that, and it wants safety. It wants the known all the time. So what it's known, so it's going to project things into the future that you should or shouldn't do based on the results it's had from the past. It doesn't. Anything outside of that is scary as fuck to the mind, you know, like going off and starting a new job or quitting a relationship or all that. All these things are safe. And that's where I found with my previous relationship, it was known. It was familiar. Not having that, like I would spend, as I've said to you, I'd be in the fetal position on the floor in tears like a blubbering mess, like a child, not knowing where this woman was or why she doesn't want me or why I'm not with her, why she's not in my life, you know. She was like, this rhetoric was running in my head, like she's the one for me, she's all this, I'll never find another one, oh, someone else is going to get the best version or all that. No, they're just going to get a version of her. Will she change? I don't know. Has she changed? I don't know. Is she moved on? I don't know. It's none of my business, you know. What matters is what I know, what I can control. But that mindset, that victim mentality, that poor me, that I'm not good enough, that was running my life, and it got to the point where it nearly put me in the ground twice. Yeah. And that's how powerful this mind is until you can get a hold of it, is that the shadow and the ego is happy for its vessel to no longer live and therefore for it to destroy itself rather than go to a place of unknown and fear. That's how bad it was for me.
Yeah, so they can be parasitic in that they're feeding off their host
100%.
If we don't have our eye on them.
Yep.
You're a beautiful paradox, Blake, because one of the things about you is that you do have this masculine hero archetype, but then you're also here to talk about being, you know, in the fetal position on the floor weeping like a baby, and you're also willing to share vulnerably about things, and it doesn't disempower you to do that. And what I see that you've done is you've taken these hidden bits of you that you didn't have your eye on before and you've incorporated them into your persona. So you've taken aspects of your shadow and integrated them into who you are as a being, and they're not running the show anymore because you've got your eye on them. And you're in a more empowered and light-hearted, less serious, less desperate place than you were before. You've really done a remarkable transformation. I just want to acknowledge that.
Thank you, yeah.
And listening to you speak, like you articulate all this stuff so well and so beautifully. And the question, like I know you're in a bit of a crossroads in terms of career and relationship and things like that in your life. And the question I have for you is like, where to now for Blake Abbott? Like, what do you have a vision? Is there a new vision for your life emerging, or?
Yeah, funny you should mention that. It's only just recently dropped into place that like I love instructing and I love helping people. I love passing on knowledge and being of service. And I have done. I realise that's not because I was forced into that. That's what I've naturally fallen into, and I quite enjoy it. I'm not intimidated in front of people. I've been in front of hundreds of people, soldiers, and organised triathlons, big events, all that sort of stuff. That sort of stuff doesn't intimidate me. But working one-on-one is, I think, where I want to get back to. So in the PT side of things, I got away from it, again, because it was a narrative that, I can PT and I just been everyone's counsellor. That was just an excuse. That was a deflection, And I don't know what that was about, but that was many, many years ago. So I'm going to go back into doing some one-on-one PT and integrating the mindset as well. So I'm not a counsellor and like that, but I have, as we've touched on today, decades of experience in all different situations, but specifically life, and being a guy that's done the jobs that a lot of people don't want to do and love doing it. I'm not going to leave the fire service, but I'm on the side and just open up this little bit of PTing, just one-on-one, quite, niche, what a niche area. And then I want to work with guys who, because there are men out there of my generation, younger and probably older, super successful. They got all the toys, they got all the money, they got all the trappings, and they're fucking miserable, and they don't know why. Because they've been chasing this external thing that they think this next thing is going to make them great. They've got all the money in the world because they're running from something. They're afraid of something. For me, it was the dangerous jobs. I was running from this scared little boy, so I put myself in fucking dangerous positions and did some really, really hard things because that took my mind off having to face that little boy in the car who was terrified. As we got to. Since I've integrated him out of the car, that need and desire for me to put myself in dangerous situations and physically challenging situations, it's not there. It's shifted.
Right.
So I don't need to quote unquote prove myself, not to anyone else, but to myself anymore. I'm actually starting to become very happy with who I am. I had a massive issue with food. So I would binge eat. I had this association with food. I now understand that was developed from that time in primary school after that incident. And my parents, who weren't parents, they were just there. I was never told ever that I was just loved for randomly. Never given a random hug by either of them. I was fucking belted by my old man. And the psychological damage from my mother was incredible. I don't know why those two stay together. I really don't. It's just, seriously, with the things that she used to say about him. And then I would run from him. I would see myself in him in a mirror, and I'd cringe and I'd run away and I'd try and do something else, because of the image that she created about him in my mind. So all this damage. So I was running and running. I was distracting myself from actually what I knew subconsciously that I had to do was face it. Yeah. And I'd been a scared little boy in a man's body for way too long. Yeah. And that's so. And I think, intuitively, I know there are a lot of men out there like that who will never admit it. But if they're listening to this, they're probably sitting there, yep, okay.
So you're not going to be the average PT guy. No. You're interested in working with a certain clientele who maybe haven't addressed the underlying motivations for how they're showing up in life. Yep. And I think what you have to offer is mentorship, coaching, and looking at even, shadow aspects or unconscious or unhidden motivations or drives behind why we do the things we do. And so I think you've got a lot to offer as a coach and mentor to men because of the experience you've been through and the remarkable results that you've gotten, and certainly for PT and training. And you mentioned food, and so I imagine also that you probably have something to offer around how to change the relationship to food and nutrition. And so, so you're probably going to move out of, you're not necessarily going to leave the fire service, but you're going to start this as a business, like doing some PT coaching, mentoring for men.
Yep.
So yeah, anyone out there listening, I can highly recommend Blake Abbott to be that person.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, it's got a, I think one of the things, just touching on what you said before about men not wanting to reach out and do this sort of stuff, I think for me, what not so much what I needed, because I got exactly what I needed. I think one of the things I want to offer is the physicality as a one-on-one, because if men are physical, I'm generalizing, but no, not all men are like this, and I suppose, and some women are definitely like this as well. But if we got a physical aspect to the session, and then integrated in the session is just the talk as well. I can see these sessions starting out quite brutal for a while, because I'm not a touchy-feely PT. I never have been, all right? So we're going to work together. We're going to work hard, and there's going to be sweat, and you're going to be taken to physical places where you're going to break, and you need to break. Not to a point of, oh my God, I'm done, but you need to break those barriers down of what you think you can do, because, David Goggins talks about his 40% rule, where he's, when you think you're done, it's your mind. Your body can keep going. You're only 40% done. So it's breaking through those barriers. And when those barriers get broken down, you realize physically what you can do. And so then we can start talking about, or it might happen really quickly, because when people get into position, I've done this in the military as an instructor, and you've got groups of men or individuals who are physically spent, they are done, and then they get up and they go again. My God,
Does that bring up some emotion there for you? That ability to be spent and to keep going, which has been your life story. At times you felt, I'm done, I'm spent. But there was something inside you, a spark, that I'm not really done.
Yeah, it's I'm not sure where the emotion comes from, but it's just there's just heaps of guys out there that I think can probably feel it.
Yeah, maybe, I don't know if it's where the emotion might be coming from, but I can see the level of the emotion. And one of the things that comes up for me is that it might be something like this, that, in some ways, whether men abandon themselves or men have been abandoned by culture and society. I look at the suicide rates of returned veterans in the US. 22 veterans a day kill themselves in the US. And we send these young men off to fight wars in foreign countries, and they come back broken, and they don't really get what they need in terms of healing. And these guys kill themselves, and maybe you've been close to doing that, and maybe it's that collective sadness and grief around when the masculine is abandoned, and that's a lot of sadness in that. Now that stuff shouldn't happen. And we ought to feel some sort of collective grief, if not guilt, that we actually allow that to happen. And it's one of the reasons I like to work with men, and I know those statistics. I know men tend to not want to talk about what's going on for them, and when they don't talk about things, they're more likely to do that. And so one of the things that you offer, I think, as an advocate in the men's space is that you've been there, you've been through those hard times. And so I think men are going to be able to relate to you, and you reached out for help, and you overcame the obstacles to that, and you've transformed yourself in an amazing way. And and you're in touch with your feelings and your emotions, which makes you just all the more relatable. And so I think that's so much to offer. I'm going to segue a little bit. Have you got a high testosterone level, or have you ever had it checked?
Yeah, I had it. Actually, my pituitary gland is done. It doesn't work properly. So I thought I had chronic fatigue. Got to the point where I was at the fire station and the bells dropped, me out of a job, and I couldn't get out of the chair. My brain, everything worked up there, but physically it wouldn't work. Anyway, long story short, I had it all done. My pituitary gland doesn't work, and so my testosterone was 1.
Oh, wow, in your boots. So did you have to get TRT?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. That's interesting too, because I've been doing a little bit of research in this area. I'm 62 and I'm thinking maybe my testosterone's low. I had it checked maybe 5 years ago and it was in the normal range but at the low end. And I thought, well, if I go to, I thought, well, what are the natural things that I can do to raise my testosterone? Because one of the benefits of testosterone is that it makes difficult work more enjoyable, which is one of the things, I see that you're able to do. You're able to push yourself through real physical exertion, whereas I get to a point and I'm like, oh, that's enough. This is no longer enjoyable. And I've heard Andrew Huberman talk about this on his podcast. And so I'm looking at a couple of things. One, sunlight. Just sunlight can help raise your testosterone. I even do red light therapy now on my balls, like putting red light wavelengths on the testicles can increase testosterone production. And another thing that people don't know about is, and I got this from Andrew's podcast as well, is that for a man, if he's aroused sexually and going through the sexual act, but doesn't ejaculate and retains his semen, which I've done, I've practiced this through my yoga practices, is that through doing certain tantric yoga practices, you can learn to retain your semen. You can have as much sex as you like, but have full control over whether you ejaculate or not. And when you don't ejaculate, it causes a huge boost in testosterone. So I'm looking at raising my testosterone level so that I can push through when things get hard and I can enjoy that physical workload. But the other thing is that what I'm looking for from having a raised testosterone is that competitiveness and that drive and that mental clarity and that focus. And these are all things that are coming from having, like your testosterone at the right level. And I see that you have a lot of those things. And so it's just inspiring. You inspire me, to get my testosterone level up.
Yeah, I think it's something that in today's society, it appears that there is a demasculation happening, either on purpose or, not on purpose. But it's the quality of food is a big thing too.
Yeah.
You look at our grandparents, their testosterone levels, I'm going to butcher these quotes, but they were quite high when they were back in the day. Even as older men, because of the diets and everything, living on the farm, grass-fed, all that sort of good bioavailable nutrients. These days, highly processed diet, Western diets, basically taken over the world, and we're getting, and all the plastics and everything that's leaching into the water and things like that is having effect. Now, not only is testosterone an essential hormone for males, but also for females, for males, but the big thing about it is that from the benefits that you just described, but we also then don't become a burden on the healthcare system, because the more testosterone or the better regulated our levels are. And for mine, the levels that they use, I think it's 10 to 30, is it? It's natural range, something like that. Yet. Whatever levels they use, they're for sedentary aged men.
Right.
So you get someone who's a little bit active, let alone does my job, and their testosterone levels down around 12 or 13 at the lower end, they're barely getting by, and then, oh no, we can't do anything in the right levels. And it sounds quite negative. I just think the system's sort of like pushing back for some reason against that, because the better your testosterone levels, the better your hormone panels within the male system and the female, but the males specifically, the less susceptible you are to disease, the less vaccines you need, the less medicines you need, the less pills you need, the better you are as a man, as a father, as a brother, as a son, as a partner, because you're more regulated. You've got low testosterone, there's a good chance, because homeostasis in the body, it wants to balance out. So there's an equal and opposite reaction. So if you've got really low testosterone, there's a good chance you might have a little bit low, or your estrogen levels might be out. So for you, my test and estrogen levels will be completely different to yours, just for normal daily function. So they're all different. But one hormone is decreasing over time, which it naturally does. Then you add in the fact it's got less not so good quality food and that sort of stuff. That drops off. So what does that affect? Because something has to ramp up to try and equal it out, to get homeostasis. And I'm really not technical or medical in that term, but that's my understanding about how systems work. So getting blood work done is very important, at least every 6 months, and knowing what sort of blood panels to pull from your doctors, having a doctor that's willing to do it, A lot of it's covered by Medicare is important. But then once you get it, is having someone who knows what they're looking at and can break it down for you and explain, right, this is this. And not just going to throw pills at you, but like you get sunlight, you need more of this, you need more of that. Get outside, fresh air, ground, all that sort of things. You might need some supplements. One thing I'm finding is vitamin D. Even though my vitamin D was really down and I'm in the sun a lot. So I just thought, I was really surprised by that. But something in my system is not acclimating the vitamin D. So I'm taking extra supplements, which is fine. So I have to take vitamin D, which is not expensive. But yeah. So whether it's not getting it from food or whatever, but I've got on my diet squared away, getting plenty of sun, but there's something else that's in me. So those sort of things can be important. As we know, vitamin D, very important with this fighting colds and things like that at the moment, so that sort of stuff. And then staying lean, another big benefit of testosterone is it keeps your body fat regulated. Yeah. So what's most important in the human species is not decreasing your body fat, it's increasing your lean muscle tissue. Yeah. So there's plenty of drugs out there and doctors that'll prescribe you drugs to get thinner, as in drop body fat. And this big Ozempic thing at the moment's going crazy because the Hollywood's onto it. Yeah, it'll drop your scale weight, but it's decreasing bone mass, it's decreasing skeletal body tissue, it's decreasing a lot, it's causing a lot of damage. But actually what it does, presents you dropping kilos really fast. It's quite dangerous. So what we should be doing is eating protein from meat. Yeah, if you're a vegetarian, you can get protein from other sources. My recommendation is to get protein from a powdered source to start with until you do the research on how you can get it from plants. But it's not as a bioavailable, but you can get plant protein in powders, which is quick and easy, and you can get a good dose of protein that way. But for the people who eat meat, you got to eat meat. You got to eat red meat. You got to eat those bioavailable proteins because we can survive without carbohydrates. We can go into ketosis. Yeah, we can live on fats. Yeah, we don't need a lot of fats, but we cannot, under any circumstances, not have protein. It builds cells. It's amino acid based. It builds muscle tissue. Everything in your body is built from protein and amino acids.
I'm a carnivore.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can you just briefly, so your testosterone was 1 or in your boots and you did some blood work, and when you discovered that, then it was suggested you go on testosterone replacement therapy? Or?
I had to go through the whole system. It took me about 6 months to get the TRT.
Yep.
That's just because it's even worse now, apparently.
Once you started the TRT, was it night and day? Like was it a big game changer? And can you just describe what that was like? Like when you started it, how did it change? What did it change?
So as it started, and we had to figure out the doses and the levels, and it was six come down to 6 weekly injections, and you go to the doctor, get a script, blah blah blah. When it all happened, I felt like Superman. I felt like I'd run through walls. It was amazing, and then it leveled out, and I just dealing with things was easier. It was much easier. Yeah, because I don't know what chronic fatigue was like, but that's what I thought I had. I really couldn't get out of my way, and I just couldn't be stuffed. Couldn't be stuffed doing anything. You literally just shut down as a male. So you just become less male.
Right.
It was scary, yeah. And it's just one tiny little hormone, but it has this stigma attached to it, that, oh my God, you're on TRT, oh, you're on steroids, so therefore you're going to be violent and you're going to bash someone or a woman or something. True. That's not true.
Yeah.
Any abuse of that, those anabolics, what they will do will heighten your natural whatever you are. If you're an aggressive person and you take,
it'll just amplify that.
Yeah. If you're going to lose your hair at 60 and you start taking this stuff, you'll lose it earlier.
Gotcha.
Yeah. That's all they do. Yeah. But under therapeutic doses in controlled settings, they're not dangerous. Find me one case study where someone's died of steroids. Direct. That's the only thing. An overdose of steroids. You can't find it because it's not there. Plenty of alcohol and drugs, but no. That's for another podcast.
It's a whole other podcast. Yeah. Well, yeah, look, I think it's been great having this chat with you. As well as I know you, I learned so much more about you today. And, yeah, you've just become this real eloquent articulator of your life experience. And your story is compelling and relatable. And my wish is that, there's some men listening to this podcast that hear something available for themselves and maybe reach out for some support or look at maybe doing things differently in their life, particularly if they're feeling desperate. And I guess the message is that there is help out there and there is support out there. And I think you're evidence of that. Not I think you are. So, thanks for coming on. It's been delightful. This probably won't be our last podcast together. I really appreciate you driving down from the Gold Coast for it. And, I wish you all the best. And if I can support you anyway, moving forward with your new business concept of being a PT mentor and coach, I'd be only too happy to. Oh,
awesome, man. I really appreciate it. And you have been you've been a lifesaver. And I don't say that lightly. I was in a pretty bad place. And look, for anyone who's listening, any men out there that are listening who can resonate with any of it or all that I've said, you know what I do for work, you see how I present, all that sort of stuff. It happens to everyone. Everyone's got their own demons that they're dealing with, and just come forward. You can reach out, Blake Abbott Mentor on Instagram. Just DM me if you want. We can start a conversation. Just can be a conversation, but you're not alone. You're not hurting. You're not broken. You're not different. We all go through it. We've all been through it, So, and I guess that's what the emotion was. It's just like it's real. Everyone, it's all out there. And the more we don't talk about it, and I did it for decades, and it nearly put me in the ground. I don't want to see that happen to anyone else. Awesome. So men can find you on Instagram at BM Abbott. No, it's Blake Abbott Mentor. Oh, Blake Abbott Mentor. Yeah. That's ABBOTT. Blake Abbott Mentor on Instagram. Great. Yeah, I would encourage men looking for some support or mentorship. Check Blake out. He's awesome. Appreciate it, mate. Great. All right. Fun. Thank you. We'll do it again one day. Yeah. Sure. Cheers. All right. Thanks.